Shane McCall, welcome to Legally Contented. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Wayne. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Shane McCall. I am one of the equity partners at my firm, Koprince, McCall, Pottroff. We're actually located in Lawrence, Kansas, outside of Kansas City, but we work with federal contractors all over the country, and even some with some international presence as well.
Shane, I appreciate you joining me on this episode. I reached out to you because you've got an interesting niche blog regarding government contracting. As you alluded to, that seems to be a large client base for your firm. So this idea of small firm, but big blog, big niche fascinates me. And I'm curious to hear about how today that blog is running, because that blog is at least 10 years old. I think it's closer to 12 years old. So there's a lot of time invested in getting it running the way it is. There's been time for it to really have an impact on the firm's business. But give me a little bit of a sense of your personal background after graduating law school, your path to Koprince, and how you got into government contracting, because I imagine few people in law school say to themselves, when I graduate law school, I'm going to practice government contracting law.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I did not have that background in law school. I did do a little bit with administrative law and wanted to potentially go into environmental law. So I took some administrative law courses, which actually dovetail nicely with the current practice with federal contracting, but it wasn't the intended goal and focus all through law school. I did actually ended up doing bankruptcy law for about 7 years with the firm in Kansas City, also a boutique firm with kind of a outsized presence and footprint, which I think, current firm Koprince, McCall, Pottroff also has that kind of outsized footprint. We kind of punch above our weight, or we like to think so. So yeah, I did the bankruptcy practice for a number of years, and then wanted to transition into a different practice, and had heard about this firm located in Lawrence, Kansas, which is a college town outside of Kansas City, where University of Kansas is located, and of course a lot of basketball fanatics out here because it's kind of a college basketball mecca as well. But heard about this firm started by Steve Koprince, had some kind of mutual contacts in just, friends of friends, and our kids did the occasional thing together, and saw they had an opening, and I was looking to transition away from the bankruptcy practice at that time. So it was kind of a perfect moment. And it really spoke to me because bankruptcy, is, like a lot of law practices, is pretty stressful. There's a lot of negative things that happen that led people to bankruptcy. I guess you could put it that way. In this practice, with working with federal contractors, there's often stressful things and some negative things, but there's also a lot of win-win successful situations, whether it's working kind of on a little bit of a partnership type agreement or joint venture for two companies to work together and maximize their opportunities. Also, this practice kind of worked for me when I heard about it because it's very much writing heavy. There's some a little bit of oral advocacy, of course, at times, but a lot of the stuff is done on the briefs. It's kind of administrative litigation. Even when it's in federal courts, it's still more reminiscent of administrative litigation. There's not a lot of, there's a little bit less discovery, not a lot of depositions and that sort of thing. And even the blog itself was a little bit of an interesting, attractive thing for me when I was kind of interviewing at this firm. And I say that because there was kind of a plan for marketing, and a lot of it did center around our blog, which is called SmallGovCon.com. And there was a path laid out of how to do marketing rather than just, you come in here, you figure out what you want to do to try and market and get referrals. So that was very attractive, and that's how I kind of ended up at this firm.
So there's so many things to
Yeah.
come off there. I'm curious, let's start with the most recent thing you just said, the marketing plan. What was communicated to you as a would-be lateral attorney coming over from the other firm? What was conveyed to you about what the plan would look like and what your role would be in it?
Um, sure, that's a really good question. So the main focus of it actually is the blog. Um, the blog and writing articles for the blog is, I would say, the primary marketing tool we use. Along with the secondary would be um, webinars and going to conferences, and then additionally we do some articles, longer form articles. But the main thing was, if you keep going on the blog, you kind of get your name out there as an author. We get people from organic search results that find articles on the blog and see your name on it, so you can kind of get your name out there that way, and get new referrals in from writing from blog articles. And that's sort of the focus. I mean, I hate to oversimplify it, but if you kind of keep going with the blog articles, it is a very good marketing tool. It also helps, though, in talking to clients, because you're always sort of up to date on this practice area and new regulatory updates and new case law. So if you can use it as a marketing tool, but it's also an internal resource for people in the firm. If now that I read basically all the articles that go out, I always know a little something about what a new client is talking about when they come in, at least most of the time.
Well, we always talk about efficiency in the practice of law, and what better way to be efficient at both the substantive practice of law and marketing than to learn about recent developments in your area of the law for your own benefit and then write about it for the benefit of the firm in terms of its marketing and business development efforts. It's perfect, right? You kill two birds with one stone. And you make an interesting point too, that when you are writing the kind of blog that your blog is, which is a timely blog, you're focused on recent developments in the federal government contracting world, and I'm sure aspects that might be related to it, but not 100% squarely in that world. When you are writing about developments and you have a client that comes to you, either a current or prospective or a previous one, regarding some issue they heard about. Oh, we just heard about these new regulations. We just heard about this new requirement. And you could point back to a blog post that you wrote 2 weeks ago or last month. That does a couple things. One, it really impresses upon the client that you know what you're talking about, because in a way you've already anticipated their question because you wrote about that development, that new requirement, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wrote the blog post in a way where you've put in some commentary and you've put in some now what or so what into the post, you're showing them that you're thinking about this already. So they come to you and you have this covered. You can point them to the link for more information. It saves you time from having to spend 30 minutes walking through it, but also gives them some real comfort, hopefully, that you all are the people to talk to because you already covered this. You're aware of this and you're thinking about it for your clients.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And sometimes a lot of times that can be something we do. We don't have to bill a client for that. We talked about it with them, in the past month or two, and there's an update. We can shoot that over to a client, or they see it. We also do a newsletter where people can subscribe and get kind of, the top blog articles. So that's also something where some of our clients see it that way, and they say, just saw this recent article in your newsletter, want to do a call about it. And so it can kind of lead directly to some additional work, or sometimes it's just we give them an update and they find it very helpful. So then they kind of keep us at the top of their list. But a lot of times it has led to directly to something like there's a new regulatory update. We work in the small business federal contracting world is a big part of our practice, although some of what we do doesn't really have anything to do with small businesses. But within that small business world, got to pay attention to all the small business administration regulations. And they kind of, as one example, SBA has very specific requirements for joint venture agreements that involve a small business and a large business. And then when they update those rules, they don't come out and say it, but it's sort of implied, well, wait, you may have to update some of these agreements just to keep things compliant. So then we, also, want to provide that to our existing clients through the newsletter, and then prospective clients out there. And then they may come around and say, well, we saw about this. We want to make sure that our joint venture is updated, or we're doing a new one and want to make sure it's meeting all the current versions of the regs. So it's really kind of helpful for them, also helpful for us. We get a little work out of it on a lot of occasions too.
Before we dive more into the blog and the process that you have for it, I'm curious, when you were looking at joining Koprince, when you were just generally looking at your next step in your career, did you have an appreciation for marketing and business development? Were you asked at your prior firm to be bringing in cases, to be building your book? What was your mindset like then? And how did you react to the idea that this firm had a marketing piece of the puzzle that it could plug you directly into?
Yeah. Well, the marketing sort of plan at Koprince was simpler and kind of direct, as I kind of alluded to earlier. It's write articles for the blog, expand that, and I'll mention one other thing we do. We do write handbooks, kind of a in-depth guide to a specific set of rules or something like that, and we publish those kind of intermittently a few times a year or whenever we get around to them. It's kind of a deep dive. Of course, we can kind of use some of what we've amassed on the blog to write a little bit of that, but that's a kind of another aspect of this marketing kind of pyramid with the blog at the top. But yeah, in the old practice, it was mainly referral based from other attorneys, other maybe accountants and other professionals making referrals over. And there wasn't a lot of, it was sort of informal, or there wasn't a lot of direct guidance on, oh, this is how you do that. It was just, figure that out, kind of getting in close to a lot of other people, becoming friendly with them. So it was kind of almost based on personal friendships to some extent. And so I found that idea of marketing through a blog, much easier for me, just because, having it based on kind of personal friendships is frankly a little bit harder for me than just, okay, we write really good articles, we demonstrate our knowledge of the law, and we demonstrate that we can communicate it all through the blog. And that's a really good marketing tool and advertisement for potential clients out there, because they see it. And then, of course, you got to talk to them and make sure you're comfortable with them. But yeah, I find that a lot simpler than the sort of amorphous way that you would go about talking and getting clients otherwise. Yeah.
Content, whether it's a blog, whether it's a series of articles, whether it's podcasts or videos, it is your 24/7, 365 advocate. It's your 24/7, 365 salesperson. It is working when you are not. It is working when you're working. It is always out there for you, showing people your knowledge and your wisdom, assuming that your content actually has your knowledge and wisdom captured in it. But it's amazing when you think about that. When you are out walking the dog when you're with your family, when you're sleeping, if someone is Googling for a government contracting issue and they come across the blog, they are pulled into the firm's marketing world without you having to do anything. You've done the work already. You and your colleagues, you put it out there, you published it, you set it free into the world. Compare that to you having to go to those networking events, whether it's at the bar, whether it's an industry event or a conference or whatever. You can only do so many of those, especially when you've got a full plate of work waiting for you. If you've got a family at home waiting for you as well, you can only do so much. And while I totally think that you can't get away from the in-person communications, the in-person meetings, because they help so much solidify relationships, man, can content marketing really get you so far down the road? It can get you 80, 90% of the way there, because you've proven to people at a pace that they like, right? They're reading a couple blog posts of yours, then they put it away, they come back to it, listen to a podcast, they put it away, they come back to a next one. It's not you being salesy, trying to ask for that next piece of business. They can on their own time, go and consume your content. And then when they're ready, they can call Shane up and say, hey, Shane, I read this recent blog post. I saw the newsletter. I've been reading your posts for a couple of years now, or a couple months, whatever. I think I'll have a problem that I could use your help with. It's amazing, right? When you get those phone calls, it's amazing, because it shows you that we've really evolved in the legal marketing world to this point where content can get you so far, and it establishes you as an authority, as reputable. It's your knowledge, it's your wisdom, but it's not having to be face to face on at rubber chicken dinners
Yeah.
and out late at night, right, to shake hands. You can start with the content, get a lot of the way there, and then use the personal communications, the meetings to bring it home.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because, like I said, we do, other marketing tools as well. We used to do um, video recordings, putting those on YouTube, and we paused that basically because I find it to be more work in some ways. Just because the people that we hire and myself, we like writing, and so it comes pretty natural. The YouTube side of it, we did get some interest from that, but it in some ways it can be more work if you're recording, even if it's a short thing like 5 minutes, say you record it, 5 times and you prepare for it. It ends up taking about as much time maybe as a short article, and then you just don't quite do as many. I think we can put out a lot more interesting articles. And if there was more time, maybe we'd throw in, the additional YouTube thing. But we do marry it to traditional networking, going to conferences, and webinars now, which I guess I don't know if you call that traditional marketing. Maybe it's almost got to that point. But yeah, we do add those things in as well. But yeah, definitely the blog has to be the bottom of the pyramid. Like I was saying, almost like the food pyramid or something. You have your content from the blog, and then you use that in your other marketing endeavors, just as you're saying.
For the firms that have the people power to do so, I think the repurposing of the written content into a video content and or podcast content is a no-brainer. Again, if you've got the resources, you could imagine how you could either have a 2 or 3 minute video for every blog post. If you had someone at your firm who was a natural in front of the camera, could do it in 1 or 2 takes and be done with it. Or you could have a weekly summary or a monthly summary of recent events. That way people who like to watch videos and or people who want to get to know you off the paper and to see
Yeah.
you and your mannerisms on video, they get a piece of content that way. And of course, the podcasts, you can just strip the audio off of the video and boom, you've got a podcast. You can add a custom introduction if you want, but you can repurpose that. And you see some firms do that. Some firms, they reinvent the wheel and they've got a podcast that's completely different from the blog, that's completely different from the video. And God bless them if they have enough people and money to hire those people and time to do all that work, great. But firms the size of your firms and firms that are typically nimble without a huge marketing or business development team, they can repurpose things in a way that uses the same core content, but it is now being pushed out in different forms to hopefully please people who might want to listen to you for a half hour or 45 minutes while they're mowing the lawn or walking their dog in their ears through a podcast like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the YouTube might have been very helpful. It's just we just kind of make some choices. Yeah. We used to take your top blog post of the month and turn it into a video. And the only thing was, it was rare when we would hear from someone that said, and we do hear it occasionally, I still do actually, because we still have some videos out there, and they say, we heard about your firm from the video, but the people that hear about it from the blog is, it seems about almost daily. If someone knows or they, someone else, the person they heard it from may have gotten our name from the blog as well. So that's still definitely the leading referral source, I would say, for our firm.
So by my count, you joined the firm about 6 years after Steve Koprince launched SmallGovCon. Now, do you have an origin story? Are you aware of what was the founding reason for the blog back in 2011?
I've heard some things over the years, but Steve Koprince was, a very good attorney, but also kind of a marketing genius and took it very systematically. So I know he looked at all sorts of resources and did his own research and looked at books and things like that. And one of the things he did was write a very comprehensive book, a Small Business Guide to Federal Contract, I believe is what it's called. And that was part of his initial marketing push to start his own firm. And then the blog was the other kind of linchpin to that. And I think that was just, I don't know exactly what he was thinking at that time, but it was the linchpin to the marketing. Um, get the blog out there, put very high quality content, and also easy to digest. No legalese, plain English, those sorts of things that we mention those all the time, but we also have to come back and make them be that way when we write too. So the origin story maybe is a little hazy, but it was a very planned out set of kind of marketing principles. Some of those other things I mentioned too are in there, but the blog was definitely the heart of that, just to get the name out there and get it going, and then keep it going with consistent high quality content year after year, and we've kept those guiding principles as we inherited the blog.
What's the universe of government contracting blogs out there?
There's definitely other ones out there, and we take a look at them, and they have good content as well. Um, I don't know if any of them that I've seen definitely haven't been around as long, and they don't have the level of articles on them. You know, they just don't have as deep of a number of articles, and then a lot of them don't post as frequently. We try to do a post almost, probably two substantive posts a week, and one we do like a weekly news roundup every Friday, and we've continued that. A lot of people like that. Those, if it's a smaller regulatory update, maybe it's more of a lot of news articles in there too, or something where we just don't want to write a whole blog article about it, but it's still interesting, some policy change or something like that. So we try to keep, basically 3 articles a week when we can. And obviously sometimes things get a little hectic, and you got to play catch up. And then I like to do the ones where, you keep your, um, email alert for regulatory updates from the Federal Register. And if something interesting comes out on there, I like to have those ones posted as soon as possible. So sometimes I jump on those, or if one of our other attorneys can do that, and we get those ones up there just so people kind of see that there's a brand new rule coming out. It's going to have an effect on a lot of things. And we also, honestly try to be one of the first ones out there. And then we also more recently in the past few years, we've had that then pushed out to social media as well, but still keeping the blog as the foundation.
I want to touch on some of those points, but I would be remiss if I didn't come back to something you said, which is when you were looking at different firms to join, the blog was interesting to you as part of the marketing plan at Koprince. And I often say to my clients, that content marketing, thought leadership marketing can be a recruiting tool, not just a marketing and business development tool, that people can see that a firm has this marketing apparatus, and through that marketing apparatus, the firm can establish itself as a leader in a particular area of the law. So if you, as a would-be lateral associate or partner, wants to continue in that area of law, that practice that the firm has, then you see that they have this infrastructure ready for you to come and join. And it's important that that you are a real live example of someone who saw what Steve had built with the blog and the marketing system around it. And that actually played a role in you joining the firm, and you became equity partner. So I'm assuming that was a good hire on Steve's part. But it's just important, I think, to remember that, yes, it's a recruiting tool. And I would imagine that there might be law clerks, interns, associates who see the blog today and might reach out to you all if they want to do government contracting. They know it's a federal practice. They don't have to be next to you in Lawrence, Kansas to do the work. So I just want to make that point because it's great to see that live and in action.
Yeah, it definitely was, because I think I was looking at, like a larger firm, general counsel sort of government position, and a small firm, or maybe starting my own firm at the time when I was making this transition. And yeah, the marketing side of it, and having the blog, and sort of having that sort of simple way to do the marketing rather than it be unknown, or you have to figure it out when you get there, or figure it out on your own. That was a key kind of recruiting tool. Like I said, the kind of pounding the pavement idea, it can definitely work for some attorneys, but this alternative model of focusing on the content, as you're calling it, it really kind of it keeps it simpler. Like whenever you're, maybe you have a little bit extra time, work on a blog, or in between, you just need to maybe kind of your mind is focused too much on. We do a lot of, like I said, administrative litigation, and you're deep within that, and you actually just need almost a refresher for your brain. Of course, you should do other things like exercise, but you can also write a blog post. It's a different sort of writing muscle, and it's also helping your marketing too. So it's a great way to change up what you're doing, get a little refresh, and then help your marketing at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I think the change in writing style, the change in structure that a blog post presents versus a memo for a client or some administrative filing or some other kind of legal filing, it's, dare I say, refreshing for you to be able to almost literally roll up your sleeves and start writing 1,000 words about a recent development in a way that's more plain English, in a non-legalese fashion, much more so than you would be writing for the court or writing for an administrative agency. It's refreshing. It's a change of pace, and it allows you to tap into creativity that perhaps you don't always get to tap in the humdrum, ordinary course of the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
How did you build a system, or how has the system worked where you are being served up candidates for blog posts? You mentioned about sometimes you can have Google alert for certain changes, certain keywords, but what is the funnel like in terms of the potential topics coming into your inbox, a colleague's inbox, and the process that you all go through to weed that down to the post you're actually going to write that week?
Yeah, well, when we first kind of onboard new attorneys, that is a little bit of a challenge, and it still is, continues to be. But a lot of it we do through chat. I am always looking for those articles and send them out. Um, Email alerts, and also checking kind of the Westlaw databases for recently published decisions too. Um, we focus a lot on small business administration administrative cases, because those aren't the focus. A lot of larger firms do plenty of work in the kind of don't want to go too far into the substance here, but Court of Federal Claims, like bid protests, there's quite a few larger firms that focus on those decisions, and we write about those too. But then we focus on some of the small business administration um, uh, cases, and we check those databases, and then we kind of go back and forth, individual attorneys looking at those and shooting them into the chat, and I find them and put them in the chat. Or a lot of times you can kind of turn one case, like right now we're working on one that's a big Court of Federal Claims decision, and then we're going to slice that up into different blog posts so that it's all one topic at a time. And sometimes that's the challenge. Sometimes they're just making them shorter and making them a little bit and trimming out some of the stuff that's a little bit more important to a lawyer, but not as important to the potential client out there or the current client. What's the end result here, and not as much about how you got there, unless it's really crucial, or it's just something new that is kind of a new rule or something like that. So it's just a lot of back and forth, using chat and using email and using databases and news alerts. I'd say would be the main ones.
How often do you venture out away from pure legal developments into business or industry developments concerning the government contracting industry or the small business industry? And the reason I ask is because I've tried to help my clients see that they can become known as the go-to law firm for a particular industry if they don't just cover developments in the law regarding that industry, but news events, business issues that come up in the industry. For example, mergers and acquisitions of big players, or if there is some survey that comes out regarding something concerning the players in that industry. Do you have posts on a regular basis or at all where you are talking not just about the law, but you're talking about perhaps related issues concerning the kinds of clients you have that probably won't fall neatly into a legal development blog post?
We do on occasion. One example of that would be if there's a big, they call them solicitations in the federal contracting workplace where government's saying this is what we want people to work on. If there's one that we work with a lot of companies I provide IT services to the federal government, and so there's certain solicitations we know that'll be of interest to a lot of our readers, and we've done some where we've done a whole series where we've picked apart um, maybe the small business issues that are relevant from that solicitation and wrote about it, and then maybe some past performance issues. So of course, when we have time or when there's a really interesting one, we do that kind of update, which is definitely not exactly a legal update. We do some on a little bit on the legislative side if there's an interesting hearing, which is kind of tangential to a specific legal update. And we definitely we do week in review every week. That's where I put in a lot of the industry changes, and we also sometimes have kind of some uh, referral partners or some friends out there that are consultants, and we'll do some of that stuff on LinkedIn, linking to their posts, and they link to our posts, or we just share those on social media when it's a little bit less of a legal update. So we definitely, I mean, I try to put those sorts of news updates out every day as another kind of add on to our regular blog posts as well. So I do throw them in. It's probably something we could actually do a little bit more of on the industry side. I think it's a really good idea.
How do you balance the breaking news efforts, the news reporting efforts with the substantive color commentary? And I ask that because there are some firms, or I should say, there are some developments in the law where I don't think it benefits a firm to rush out and be first. So if the Ninth Circuit or the Fifth Circuit puts out some precedential opinion regarding class standing or white collar crime or some issue that many law firms, big and small, are going to write about, I don't think it matters. I don't think you, the attorney, should be writing within 24 hours as almost a breaking news type alert, because you're only going to be able to regurgitate what the court said. You almost certainly won't have enough time to take a moment or two to step back and think about what this means to your clients. And then when your client alert or blog post goes out, yes, you've got 50% of the post is about the actual case, but the remainder of it is your color commentary regarding how this affects clients, your client, and what people should be doing now based on this decision. Yet, when you're focused in an industry, when you have a niche like what you have in terms of government contractors, I would imagine that you actually can, sir, you can be a newsbreaker, if you will. You can be almost a reporting service, because that just builds your credibility as the law firm and the blog that has its pulse on it has its finger on the pulse of the industry and developments within the industry.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'd say with regulatory updates, I tend towards the breaking news side of it, and then more with case decisions, we usually take a little more time and try to just do a little bit different perspective. Because if it's a big case, I think there's going to be articles from different law firms out there, and so yeah, I take a little more time on those ones. And then the other thing we do, I would say probably Steve Koprince, who started the blog, he was very good at the commentary and putting a little more in there. And we try to do that. Sometimes they're just not as good at it always. But the one thing we've done a little bit more of, it's a little bit different focus lately, is we do these. We started calling it back to basics, where we take a topic. Maybe there's not a new update on it, but we realize from questions when we do webinars, we get the question over and over again. So we turn that into a post, even though it could have been the same rule for 5 years, but no one's really thought about some of these basic things. So we provide almost like a checklist in some cases for someone out there who's going to be a federal contractor. So we focus on that a little bit more and mixing in those back to basics sort of educational background primer pieces with the breaking news. And we don't have a formula, but we try to balance it. So we're not doing just, a bunch of back to basics in a row or just breaking news. And we kind of go back and forth between those two types of posts. And we do try to put in the commentary a little bit when it fits, but I always tell people, you don't have to force that in there, but sometimes it really does, feel free to put that in, or maybe it's the commentary is a little bit like, oh, this policy should change. And so we put a little bit of that flavor in there too when it makes sense.
There is this idea sometimes that attorneys can only break the news or only provide commentary. You can do those things with developments, but I think it's great that you are piecing together blog posts based on client questions and webinar attendee questions who might not be clients, because there's a good shot if one current or prospective or previous client has a question, others do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just another way for you to assert that you are the go-to firm for this kind of work, because you are putting out there the content that literally answers questions that clients, webinar attendees have. So I think it's great to obviously look at what's going on in the world around you, but your blog is a mechanism for you to convey your knowledge and your thought leadership and your wisdom. And most of the time it might be developments in the law and the industry, but it doesn't hurt to kind of go back to, you said, back to basics and remind people of certain core concepts and show your mastery of those concepts, in the hopes that it shows people that you all, again, know what you're talking about and are the people who should be helping them with their government contracting related issues.
Oh yeah, and I will say my partner Nicole Pottroff, she kind of came up with that name, Back to Basics, and the idea that we should be putting more of that content out there. We've done it intermittently, but we made it more of a focus. And the other way that we use that is, say maybe it's a prospective client that reaches out with a question, or even a current client, and we take those back to basics. And sometimes they're a little bit of a series, like Nicole's done some nice series on a certain topic when it's just too much to put into one blog post. And then you can take those and send them to the current or prospective client and say, hey, this didn't take us any time. We already have this, but here's the resources for you to get started. Then the background, then come back to us with the particular legal questions, and then we can go from there. So it's used on kind of a one-on-one basis, or can be just there's folks out there who are, like I said, consultants, or there's people out there who are helping fledgling government contractors, and we can send those resources to them. They can pass them on to the person. Sometimes that's all they need, or if they need something a little bit more complicated, then they come back to us for legal assistance.
So you mentioned your partner. You are not a one-man show. The blog is not a one-person show. So can you talk a little bit about how responsibilities for both the writing, the editing, the cultivating of topics, how that division of labor works at the firm? You're not a large firm. You've got a handful of attorneys, and I'm assuming a handful of staff people. So how have you broken up those responsibilities?
Yeah. Right. So yeah, my partner, Nicole Pottroff, we may have to change it, kind of just to co-managing editors, because it's almost like that. I think we just left it on there because I had been managing the blog for quite a few years, but we're getting to that point. Nicole comes up with topics. We have 3 associate attorneys. They come up with topics, and then once we kind of give people attorneys, when they're first writing, when they're first kind of getting onboarding, give them the sort of writing style guide, which it's not anything too formal, but it just kind of, here's the main points, here's things to look at, here's the principles to keep in mind. And then, of course, when people are first starting, you gotta edit a little bit more, and then people kind of develop their own style. And then we generally divide it up. I edit them, Nicole edits a few, and then we have our attorneys basically try to do like 2 substantive posts a month. And then, if there's more, great. If there's something where there's a big regulatory update, we can divide that up into a lot of posts. We do a few more, but we kind of have our standard number of blog posts and have people do those. And we also do some meetings and things, help people brainstorm if the process isn't working, or just people have different ideas or want to see some different way to do it. We do have specific meetings where we talk about coming up with blog post topics. So that's the basic division, though, and it's kind of keeps people on a schedule. If somebody has a pressing deadline, litigation thing, we kind of just switch it out. Or, obviously someone's on vacation, kind of switch those around. But it seems to work pretty well. And we just, people know that it's one of the lifebloods of the firm. Of course, client work has to come first, but then the blog is a very close second after that.
Some firms have a blog that is so important to their marketing and business development efforts that they require in their contracts, in their employment contracts with their associates, that those attorneys are going to write for the blog. So everyone understands what their responsibilities are. Given the importance of SmallGovCon to your firm's marketing and business development efforts, do you have a similar requirement for your associate attorneys?
Yeah, we do have a requirement. I don't know if it's specifically, it's in the job description, and we talk about it in any interview as one of the, key pillars of the firm. So it's definitely from the get-go. We talk about that being, it is part of what you have to do as an attorney. So it's definitely, I guess you call it a requirement. We try to make it kind of, fun when we can. Sometimes we've even done things, a little corny, but whoever does the most blog posts gets to pick lunch for the next month or something like that. So it's definitely something we talk about at every meeting or every weekly meeting when we're going through all our deadlines, we're going through our client matters, and we're going through our blog posts. And then it's kind of part and parcel of being an attorney at Koprince is that you have to be writing blog posts and thinking about blog posts. And you see it even from, the first couple of months when someone starts here, they're going to start getting emails from people with questions about it. And then they can that's a good segue into doing prospective calls with potential clients also. So I don't know if it's in the contract, but it's definitely understood that everybody's got to be writing some blog posts.
So the blog is up and running for about 6 years before you join the firm. Was there a point after you started when you saw, based on your involvement in the blog, that it started to bear fruit? Were you getting calls directly or new calls directly? Were you asked to speak? Was there some kind of moment where you said, this blog thing is really working for me in terms of my practice?
Definitely I would get some emails, but from prospective clients, but it would be when you start looking at, we kind of record what the referral source was, and people would mention, or Steve would mention, a lot of those are from the blog, but then I would start looking at them in our kind of customer relations software, and you would see it again and again. Oh, this one came from the blog. And then, we started seeing, you get an email just directly to you. And I'd say one moment that really stood out is we sometimes it's not that infrequent. We get an email from a government employee and they say, this is, or we hear about it at a webinar, this blog is a best source for news and analysis on small business federal contracting. And when you hear that from government employees, they say sometimes, we check this because there's no other place to get it from the government. So we want to have some clearinghouse for all that information. So that was a big eye-opening moment for me.
It's always nice when the people who are creating the content, creating the topics you're covering, it's full circle. They are coming back to you for analysis of those topics and developments. So it sounds like you can draw a direct line between the blog and new matters coming in the firm.
Oh, definitely. New matters and new clients are coming from the blog on a weekly basis. So if you had to cut out every other marketing thing we do, we would always keep the blog going because it's a really important marketing tool. And we see it. I do calls, every day or every other day, and one of those calls out of every 2 or every 3 is someone that read something on the blog. Yeah.
Has the blog led you to receive invitations to speak at conferences, to speak on webinars that aren't your firm's webinars?
It has, I think it has on occasion. I can't think of a direct example, but definitely it's been mentioned when we do webinars as like an introductory thing when someone's introducing us at a conference or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely been ones where they've specifically reached out to us because of a blog article or a series of blog posts or something like that.
I just mentioned the term direct line between the blog and new matters. Sometimes there's an indirect line, and that's because you are seen by a conference organizer or a CLE creator or an industry, a legal industry, or a government contracting or small business industry reporter, and they want to cover some aspect of the law or development based on you being seen as an authority because of the blog. And then when you're on stage at the conference or you're on stage at the CLE or your name appears and your quote appears in a news article, people contact you. So it's an indirect line, but still you arguably wouldn't have been on that stage or in that article, but for the ongoing process of posting for the blog and the blog becoming this very substantial piece of the firm's marketing efforts.
Yeah, it definitely happens with reporters when we have something and that's more on the breaking news side, and then we'll get an email within 24 hours asking for if we can do a conversation or send a quote or something for a news article. So that definitely comes from the blog. Every few months we get something like that.
Do you think your associate attorneys understand the power that their firm's blog has in terms of opening their eyes up to the value of a marketing or business development tool?
I think they do to some extent, and probably we could do a better job of, and it's something we need to do a little bit more of kind of the marketing plan, and asking people, do they understand that, and how can they kind of incorporate that into their kind of personal marketing plan, and putting stuff on social media and things like that. But I think they do because all of our attorneys, even when they've just been here a couple months, um, they will then start getting emails directly to them that say, "I read your post, had a question on it," and so I think they see that, and it's pretty common. So I think they see that right off the bat.
I have a hunch that when attorneys are younger in their careers and start to get those types of emails, that is a more powerful way to hammer home the value of marketing and business development and thought leadership content and blogging than a coach or a seminar or a CLE about it. Because when they have these phone calls coming in, it's almost too easy it's almost too easy. They don't realize what just happened here. But because the firm invested in putting out content and it was a match for the direct audience it is seeking and new clients that the firm is seeking, and someone picks up the phone and calls. Like, that's how that is supposed to work. And it's almost like getting a Ferrari for your first car when you're 16 years old. Like, you don't know what to do with it, but it's a great way to show you, like, yes, this is how marketing and business development works in this era of content creation and thought leadership content, and really hammer that home, because otherwise it could take them years, a decade, to understand the value of that
Hmm.
marketing and how it impacts their actual practice of the law.
Yeah, I think it's very impactful. Also, the other part of it, aside from just the fact that the person reached out, which is very cool, they're often very complimentary, which you kind of get you kind of get a warm fuzzy from that. It's kind of a way of helping people. Sometimes they just want a little question answered. Sometimes that turns into a prospective call and they become a client. But you kind of get that immediate feedback and that immediate impact from what you're putting out there. So it's kind of a little cherry on the top of great marketing tool, and you also kind of feel like you're getting some some thank yous from a lot of different people out there.
Before we wrap up, I'd be remiss. We talked a lot about clients here, but I'm curious, has the blog had an impact on the firm's referral sources and your personal referral sources and the relationships that both you and the firm have with those referral sources?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely because when we do kind of referral calls from industry leaders, like I said, consultants, accountants, or lenders. I think the main one of the main things driving them is the blog. they see articles, or maybe someone shared an article with them, and that's one of the main reasons they reach out to us, I would think. Some of it's from webinars, and some of it's from presentations, and just the general reputation. But if it's actually getting them to reach out to us, it's often a blog article uh, that they saw or someone forwarded to them. So it's very helpful that way.
So as we start to wrap up here, I'm curious, what would be some advice you have either for attorneys who are contemplating launching a blog themselves, or the managing partners at firms where an attorney wants to start a blog, based on your experience, especially coming in after the blog was up and running and I think functioning very well in terms of marketing and business development? What advice would you give to attorneys and managers at firms regarding getting into blogging?
Um, One thing I would say is you have to be consistent with it, and you can't really take a week off, maybe a week at the most, but you can't take more than more than a week off. Keeping your content out there and timely, and also trying to keep it consistent and um, uh, with that same sort of voice and writing style. That's also important. The other thing I would say is I think it's an easier way to kind of show your expertise and your skill, and basically to brag about yourself. That's not something that comes easy to me personally, and I don't know if our other attorneys either. But doing it through a blog, you don't have to say it. You don't have to say I'm really good at this work or I have a lot of expertise. You can demonstrate it, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind for people. That it's a motivating factor. And the other thing is it really does work. You're going to get a lot of uh, see the fruits of your labor pretty quickly, but then it also there's a very long uh, tail. Like as you were mentioning, it kind of works 24/7. We have certain blog posts that are years old, 5 years old, and it's still a very popular one, and we still get referral calls on it, even though it's from 5, 6, 7 years ago, because it just caught the algorithm the right way, and it also caught the attention of a lot of readers out there. So you keep working at it, and it's almost like compound interest. It's gonna help immediately, but it also may help way down the line. And then the last thing I guess I'd say is tie it into your other marketing efforts. That's something I'm still always reminding myself and trying to get better at, tying it into social media, tying it into just reaching out directly to industry leaders and referral sources. That's something I still need to improve on, because it's you always we hear from people that the blog is a great resource, and I'm not always reminding people or telling people about that, even though I do it when I can, but I could still do more in that respect too. So it's using that content and spreading the word, if you will, to other people as well.
Distribution is such a huge component. Obviously, you have to have the content to distribute, but once you have it, if it's not being distributed thoughtfully, strategically, and effectively, it's going to be all for naught. It's going to sit there on the website and no one's going to find it because it's not being indexed properly. It's not being put into people's hands, inboxes, you name it.
Exactly.
Shane, you've been so helpful, and I appreciate your thoughts and your guidance and your insights, considering that you have a small firm, but yet the blog, SmallGovCon, is a big blog. It's a big player in the government contracting world. And as you said before, it really helps your firm punch above its weight. You're in Lawrence, Kansas. Many of your clients are dealing with entities in Washington, D.C., and yet you're able to bring in clients from across the country because of the power of your blog. So thank you very much for joining me today. Where can people learn more about you, about the firm, and about the blog?
Go to smallgovcon.com. Can learn about us, can learn about the content we have on there. Check that out. And like I said, we have a newsletter that people can also subscribe to. A lot of attorneys do that, and as well as government people and just contractors out there. So really enjoyed this, Wayne, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think you know how well this stuff works, and I'm glad you're spreading the word out there.
Thank you, Shane. And again, thanks for your time and best of luck with the firm, the practice, and the blog.